Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida until I was 19 years old. I think in 2011 we moved to Houston. I'm currently in Houston right now, but we've moved back and forth quite a while. Immigrated to the United States from Pakistan in 1995. Um, my father, he had a pretty good career. He had a good business going on over there, but then he completely dissolved that for the sake of his family, for the betterment of his family. I think I was 2 or 3 years old at that time. So I was a toddler. I was very little. I didn't really understand the struggles that my parents went through, how difficult life was for them. Both of my parents didn't go to college. I'm first generation of my family going into college, the first woman that's in the engineering field in my family. So there's a lot of new stuff that I did. But yeah, I think growing up, a lot of this was just a struggle, kind of understanding how to be in a new country. We didn't speak the language at that time. Both my parents didn't. So it was definitely more of an emotional struggle than it was financially.
What business did your dad have in Pakistan?
My dad was kind of in the welding business. He was also in the real estate business. I think he was doing very well for himself, for his family, at that time in the 90s. But then I think he saw a better opportunity here in the United States. A lot of people were migrating here, and he just kind of took that leap of faith and he went for it.
Did your parents talk to you at all about what was going on in Pakistan at the time? I mean, you were really little, but were they happy to leave or was it really difficult for them?
I think it was mixed emotions. They were happy because better education system for his children, a better opportunity for growth, economy wise as well, but because he was leaving behind where he grew up. He was leaving behind his family, his elderly parents. He did want to go. He did see it was a good opportunity, but he was definitely sad because that is the life that he grew up with.
And what did your mom work or what did she do before she had children?
And she was a housewife. She was married when she was 18. She was engaged very young. It was an arranged marriage, as typical South Asian cultures are. So for her, it was completely new from a woman's point of view, getting married into a family, living in a joint family system. And then all of a sudden, a couple of years down, and she was pregnant as well when we moved here. So she was, I think, 8 months pregnant. We came here in May 1995. My brother was born in June 1995.
My goodness.
So, um, pregnant, married. She had me. I was a toddler, completely new country, didn't speak the language, didn't go to college. Everything was a lot of
Mm.
new at that time.
Like for you, like I know you were like a toddler
Yeah.
when all this happened, but how is that for you? Like looking back, I mean, hearing that sounds like it just sounds like so overwhelming. I remember when I was 8 months pregnant, my husband was afraid to go like to the mountains 2 hours away where my parents live. Like I mean, what is it like for you looking back and seeing kind of what your parents put on the line and in order to come here and hopefully give you and your brother a different or better life?
I was very confused growing up. It was very overwhelming, seeing my parents worry so much, and I was taller. I had no idea how to process that emotion. I really didn't know how to feel because I had a completely different culture inside the home. And going to school and then eventually starting school and going outside of the world was completely different. The language was different, the culture was different, the mindset was very different. Um, and I think until I started, I guess, my teenage years, I was just very trying to juggle both cultures at the same time. So it was a little difficult, but thankfully we're in a very, very good place now.
Yeah. And how many siblings do you have? Is it just you and your brother?
I'm the eldest, and then my brother, who he's 3 years younger than me, and then I have a sister who is 11 years younger than me.
Yeah, I can't imagine your mom going through that. Do you remember her being stressed out a lot, being sad, depressed? Just
having to deal with all juggling all of, the new culture and not having as much family and dealing with all of
Yeah,
that.
she definitely was. I mean, I guess I do remember them being worried and stressed out a lot. Now being a woman myself around that same age as when my mother came in into this country, I can definitely appreciate and I applaud them for their courage, for completely dissolving the lifestyle that they've known and grew up with in that comfort zone and kind of getting out of that comfort zone. Um, it definitely makes you appreciate their sacrifices a lot more because I feel like I wouldn't be able to take that leap of faith.
Mhm.
But they did for their family, and that was a very selfless act on their part. So, but yeah, my mom, I'm assuming she did have trouble because she didn't have any family here, and she had a newborn, she had a toddler, no help around. My father would be working sometimes two jobs at a time. So she was pretty much on her own and trying to process all this by herself.
Did she ever talk to you about wanting to work or what she would have done if she didn't have children, or was that just never discussed?
It's something that my sister and I encouraged, actually. When my sister, she was done with her schooling and she didn't need um, transportation help to and from school, we suggested that my mother should at least take English classes so she can learn the language or um, go for some kind of degree if she wanted to go back to college or even start a small business if she wanted to, so that she has something to fill up her time so she can kind of get out of that comfort zone of her house and she kind of sees the world. But now that like her responsibilities as a mother is, it's not over, but at least it's definitely significantly low now since
Yeah.
all of her children drive and they have their own school and career and so I think she has the time now to, and it's kind of unfortunate. I wish she had it earlier in life, but now she definitely is in a better place to think about herself and do something for herself. But I guess she just has that fear
Hmm.
being at home for like over 20 years, I would say. So she just doesn't have that confidence anymore to like go out and be independent.
And there's a lot culturally too that
Yeah,
probably makes sometimes we talk about getting the feeling like we're not a good woman, like we're
yeah,
failing. If I don't
yeah,
have dinner ready at a certain time because I'm busy or late from work, then I'm failing as a
right,
woman. And
right.
there's that weird pressure, especially in different cultures, it can be a lot worse.
Yeah. And we see her as kind of like the pillar of the house. I mean, like if my mother gets sick or she just wants she's in bed for a couple of days, the house completely turns over. I mean, that was like that when growing up because she was responsible for the cooking, the cleaning, making sure dinner's ready by 7 p.m. when my father comes home. So yeah, like there is that hesitancy from our side, kind of letting her, but also we also feel very bad that we were very selfish in keeping her at home and she could have done something for herself and she could have made something of herself.
I can say like I grew up I mean I was born and raised here in California, but
Hmm.
I my mom was a stay-at-home mom as well.
Yeah.
And I know for her it she did have thoughts, she grew up in California as well too, so she didn't have a lot
Mm,
of the barriers that your mom may have encountered. But my mom also, for her, being a stay-at-home mom was a labor of love, and
yeah.
she did have thoughts, I think, occasionally about trying to, find a career. She did have a or does have a college degree, and so she had the option, but just for her it was a labor of love, and
Yeah.
she took that as her career. And so I think it's your mom probably saw it the same way,
It's
and it
funny
sounds.
because my grandmother, she was a working woman in like the 80s and the 70s in that same country where my mother came from. She had to do it for the sake of her children. She had I think there's seven siblings together. And she had to support her husband financially, so she went out. And this is my mother's mother. She started teaching. Um, but I think because my grandmother was away from home the burden fell on my mother to take care of her siblings.
Mm.
And kind of, so she was forever in that house, that homemaker role, even for her siblings and her parents. And then when she got married for her spouse and her children. So I think like it's one of those things that you really don't know what's out there, so you really don't think about what I could do. So I think she was just really stuck in that position.
Right. Generations, we affect each other. And she
Yeah.
might have wished that her mom was around more. And so she
Hmm.
wanted to provide, in her opinion, a better life for her children and really
Yeah.
be hands-on in there for you. Do you remember growing up? Do you have a specific memory or a few things that come to mind as a child, noticing the difference between boys and girls, like what boys can do compared to girls, or any difference that you notice?
I think growing up, it was very roles were very categorized, and boys were stronger physically, they were goofier, they let out more. You
Yes.
could say, right? And then girls would they liked pink, they were very delicate, they were very quiet. I think I kind of adapted that role because I was in a different culture, and I was from that kind of culture that kind of categorized girls in that way. So I think growing up in school, I mean, the change itself was intimidating, but I think coming from my background, coming from that culture, I just kind of accepted that role. I
Yeah.
guess like culture.
Was there any pressure from your parents to behave a certain way or behave like a lady or learn how to cook at a young age and take care of the house more?
Not cooking specifically because I learned cooking at a very later stage in life. But definitely there was an unspoken pressure to be successful. And it kind of makes sense because my father, he had a successful career and then he um, completely got rid of that for his family. So there was this unspoken pressure that you have to become something in this new country, make us proud for the family back home. And it's funny because people back home don't even know what we're doing. But there was that you have to be successful, you have to do something in life. So you have that quote male psychology of becoming something, and then you also have to carry that female psychology that you're the homemaker. You have to make sure your
Mhm.
house is a certain way, making sure that you fill those women roles, cooking, the cleaning, the raising the children. So I think for women today, I think we're just trying our best to fill both shoes.
And so your parents didn't put a lot of gender specific stress pressure
Yeah.
on you, but they put pressure on you need to be successful. And you have extra pressure because your parents sacrificed a lot in
Yeah.
order to bring you here and their
Right.
opinion of the opportunities and you should be successful. We brought you to this place and
Right,
so
right.
it's extra pressure on
Yeah.
you as a daughter and trying to do the best you can in your career. And then you have those additional pressures of being a woman and
Yep.
have you checked those boxes of being a good woman? Yeah.
Yep. And then being women, we can't really let anybody down because that just like kills us with guilt.
Yes.
So you're just trying to do everything all at once and perfectly.
Did you enjoy school as a kid?
I did. I actually really liked school. I mean, other than the language barrier, which I third or fourth grade, I kind of picked up the language. But study wise, I was a pretty good student. I was kind of a nerdy kind of a kid. Always books, computers, mathematics it came easier to me. So I think that was kind of like my comfort zone. I wasn't really sporty or anything, but I was definitely very studious. I think that was kind of like a good indication that I could become something. Kind of gave me a little bit of it made me feel a little comfortable. Maybe I could do something. There is still hope.
There's a lot more than just some hope, but sometimes we don't understand how much pressure kids put on themselves and how in tuned they are to their parents' emotions and
Hmm.
even the pressure as a child and
Yeah.
you knowing that these expectations have been set for you. That's just so sad. Like it's funny now to think about it, but it's so sad to think of a child thinking, "Oh, thank goodness I got a good grade. There's hope for me."
I think it was just, I mean, you really can't blame the parents. I mean, because they did a lot and in
Right.
their time and in their shoes, because they did want to give a good life to the family, and as anybody, as any parent would want to do. But it was just so much new all at the same time, and you really didn't have a lot of help either. There was no family here, so it was just my my brother, my mom, my dad just trying to figure things out. And growing up, I think I was the official interpreter of the family because I spoke the language and I spoke our Urdu, which is the language that we spoke at home. So we spoke our cultural language. I spoke English. So I was always like, if there's any letter that came in the mail, or if there's anybody coming at the door trying to make a sale back then, door to door, I would be the person that they would call, like, hey, come and translate what this person is saying, and then speak to my dad or my mom and say, oh, this person is trying to sell you kitchen knives or whatever it was. So yeah, I think I had to be mature enough to understand
Yeah.
what an adult conversation was.
You
And
were kind of in the unique position too, where you were, I don't want to say, I don't know if stuck is the right word, but you were in this, balance of two cultures where at home you were, immersed in the culture that your family grew up in and that you were born into. And then at school, it's probably felt completely night and day different. And I could imagine that could be very challenging, especially for a child, to figure out the differences, the similarities, and kind of navigate that whole situation.
yeah, it was a lot of figuring things out on your own. It was a lot of falling flat on your face and kind of getting back up. Um, throughout my career, throughout schooling, I think I was at a certain age, I started filling out my own school papers.
Mhm.
And then I would just give them to my parents, like, here, sign here, and then they'll like, okay, and then that's about it. So I mean, I could have signed away anything, but I was a
Yeah.
good kid.
Was there much of a Pakistani community you said Fort Lauderdale was where you
So
actually moved? Was there much of a
bas
community there, or was it just like kind of straight immersion into America, Florida culture, and that was that?
South Florida has a lot of Hispanic culture, so there was a lot of Hispanic people there because I guess it's just closer to um, Spanish countries. But there really wasn't a lot of Pakistani culture. There wasn't a lot of a huge Muslim community, so it was very new for them, and they did kind of feel like they didn't have any help. So there were maybe one or two friends that they made within the community, and they were generous enough to help out and guide them. But yeah, otherwise no.
How is that for you, like in school, like making friends, and like did that help kind of fuel like your love of learning and wanting to, study? And was that like a safe place for you?
Yeah, it was. I was fortunate enough I did make friends because like I said, I was just smart and I loved helping out people. Um, I was always kind of on honor rolls and dean's lists, so I was doing pretty good in school, and I guess I made friends through academics, joining math clubs and chess clubs. I was very fascinated with music. I remember in middle school I joined orchestra. I learned to play the piano. I learned to play the violin. So I was really interested in stuff like that. And that's how I made friends with people who were kind of academically similar to me.
It's the best way to make friends, find people that have commonalities.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Are you very thankful for all of those activities that you were involved in related to school, like the music and a lot of the other activities you were involved in were kind of academic.
hmm
But are you happy that you did that? Do you wish you would have done more activities, or what's your opinion on that now?
I think I was very appreciative of that because I found a community that I would get involved. That's how I made my friends. That's how I kind of got away from my home culture, and I kind of felt, I wouldn't say normal, but I felt like a kid at that time. I mean, doing the sports, or sorry, doing the music or doing those clubs. It felt I mean, I don't know the word for it, but I definitely felt more comfortable in
Yeah.
school at that time. I eventually did make friends, and I think in middle school I was better at making friends. I kind of understood the school system at that time. I knew how to pick classes. I knew how to ask the right questions and interact with people. So, and I actually did make friends of my similar culture too. So, school got better in middle school, I guess. It got easier.
Did you ever travel back to time with your family in Pakistan?
We did. We would go often, maybe every other summer or every 2 summers, because we still had a lot of family back there. But since we left Pakistan in at a very young age, it was always kind of a culture shock because you'd be in America and you spend so many years here, and then you would go back and it's just a completely different world, and it was really hard juggling both cultures because and they're very different from each other.
When you were younger and you would go to
Mhm.
Pakistan, was there any shocking differences for you that you noticed?
I still think, or it just it could be my family because I know they've left a lot of the stereotypical roles now. Um, I think after I graduated, it set the path for other cousins of mine, that, oh, you go to college, have a good career. Um, it wasn't a huge shock. It's definitely gotten better now. They're more they're more open to women going to college and having a good career, versus, getting married at a younger age and just your role is going to be a housewife forever. And now I think they're more open to like having careers and doing what's best for you and kind of thinking of yourself versus just thinking about the family more.
Yeah, because I mean, your mom had an arranged marriage at a
Yeah.
very young age from our
Yep.
standards today.
Right.
And what a difference in life
Yeah. And
from that. And I'm sure just thinking about it now, but then also when you would go back there and you're seeing it, you're seeing girls that had arranged marriages and have never had a life outside of the home. What a different perspective that is.
it is completely different. And I think now people are more educated and they're understanding, they're a little more they have an open vision of that. Before it was just very different times and people were just kind of stuck in that same generational mindset. People are breaking away from that a lot now. So yeah, it's definitely gotten easier. And I think for both genders, not just females, but also for males.
What made you decide to want to get into being a software engineer? Like, do you remember something happening when you were younger? Or was it later after you were in college?
I was actually a pre-med major in college before I went into computer science. I liked the medical field. I always wanted to be either a cardiologist or a psychiatrist. It was very fascinating how the mind worked, and coming from such a diverse background, it was a lot easier to understand people. It's probably why I chose pre-med. So I shifted to computer science because I did like technology. I was really good at math. So it just seemed like a natural fit. But I think the difference was that how engineers think, they have a very logical mindset. And I was used to the medical mindset, which is just memorizing everything and just kind of figuring out things. So that was a very shift in the way of how I was learning things. So I think that was where I moved into computer science.
Where were you at your journey for pre-med? Were you working on your bachelor's or master's? And when you made that switch?
I was working on my bachelor. I think I spent a year and a half in pre-med, and then I made the switch. A lot of it was because being a woman and kind of eventually having some responsibility of the household, I feel the medical field is a very demanding field. It's a very demanding lifestyle, and you can't really always take care of your household as you wish you would. Uh, and computer science and the technology field is a little more flexible in that manner, especially after COVID. You see a lot of remote work from home options, and I think it's just easier as a woman who wants to take care of their household and still have a thriving career.
I have an interesting question for you.
Hmm.
If I told you I'll pay for exceptional childcare and a maid that'll come twice a week and clean your house, and we'll provide you with dinner every night. We'll make sure your family has an excellent meal every night. If I could guarantee you that, you would still have to pay for your own education, but would you have gone down the medical route? Would you have been more inclined?
I think I would because even today when I drive past a hospital, I still kind of feel that like
Yeah.
I could have had a white coat and a stethoscope around my neck and walking. So it was definitely I think it was definitely my dream job at that time, and I would have gone into it if I had that support, the maid, the house care. But then there's that guilt that why am I it's my home and why am I not taking care of my own home? So that guilt kind of kicks in as well. So yeah, I mean, it's a 50-50. I mean, I would have taken it depending on my situation. I think you do at a point in life, women do kind of sacrifice their dream job for the sake of their family. Still today, I see that happening.
Yeah.
Yes, we
I
do
was
too.
I was working with one of our great pulmonologists that I work with a lot last week, and she's about my age. She has two young kids, and she worked a 24-hour shift on purpose so that she could make it to
Wow.
her niece's birthday party the next morning. And
Oh,
I worked 12 hours with her during the day. I went home, slept for the night, came back the next day, and she was still there, still up. I asked her if she got some sleep. She's like, yeah, I got like an hour, hour and a
oh,
half. So, AK, she had a really busy night and she still had a
yeah,
smile on her face and was like going to the niece's birthday party. But that was just an example of some of the sacrifices that, like,
yeah,
you're bringing up the medical field. Like, yeah, it is doable. You can make it work, but it is
yeah.
just a
It's
lot of
tough.
sacrifice, a lot.
Yeah, it's really tough.
Hmm.
It's probably one of the main reasons why I had to let that field go.
Hmm.
Do you remember a lot of women in your classes in college for software engineering?
No, I don't. I had we were a class of 75 graduating students, and I was one of 8 female graduating with a computer science degree. Not a lot of people go into this field, mostly because I feel it's just a lot of programming, it's a lot of logical way of thinking. It's a lot of math. And we've kind of labeled engineering as a boys' field. So that kind of scares off a lot of women too. And I was having this conversation before this podcast with my sister. She's also in the computer science field, and there's over a decade um, age gap between her and me. And she still says that there are not a lot of women who go into STEM fields or into computer science because it's either those very masculine males that go into engineering, or they're very masculine females that go into engineering. And I mean, that was true at my time, and it's true at her time too. And it's kind of sad because there are a lot of talented women who can, if you train them up a little bit or kind of change your mindset a little, they could have very successful careers in engineering or in STEM. But I think they're just you kind of get scared off. They don't have that right community. They don't have that right support that helps them get a little comfortable into this field.
Do you remember anyone talking to you in high school about computer science and that being an option for you? When you're in high school, you'll kind of be pushed towards a certain career field, whether it's by your teachers or when you reach out to a career counselor or a counselor at the
Mhm.
university. Do you remember any particular pressure to join or go a certain route with your career?
Well, I remember from high schools, I always wanted to get into the pre-med, so that's why I took a lot of the bio, the chemistries. I took a lot of those classes, but then there was that one curriculum requirement that I had to take some kind of technology class. Either it was photography or something. And I chose a programming class, an intro to programming. And at that time, it was QBasic, that the tool that we were learning, or the programming language that we were learning. And I remember my high school. He made a joke about it, like, "Oh, I see you programming in your future." I'm like, "That's not gonna happen. I'm gonna be a doctor. I'm gonna have my white coat. I'm gonna do this." And then today I'm a software engineer, and I had no idea how that happened. I guess, and I didn't really think about it at that time either. But I think during those skill assessments that they make you do in high school, where they try to find your natural talent and it would always come up with something like an engineer or something else to come to. That's a very
Mhm.
boring field. Why would I do that? And then here I am.
Well, it's definitely, I don't know if it's ever been really boring, but it's definitely very exciting now with AI, and pretty much everything now is
Hmm.
dependent on technology,
Yeah.
especially the medical area. They depend on technology more than anything.
That's really interesting to see just over, I've been a nurse for well, 12 years now. And it's just
Hmm.
even in that 12 years, like to see how technology has been integrated into healthcare is pretty mind blowing. Like it's almost like a completely different world than when I started 12 years ago, from how we
Right.
document to like how you can, see a provider, how you can make appointments, how you can be guided through the healthcare system. It's 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 exciting to see some of the changes that there have been made, and or the
Yeah.
equipment. It's
Would you say that it's made your life easier as in the medical field?
Yeah, like I mean, from the day to day, like I mean, concrete example I can give is when I started as a nurse. I worked night shift. We had paper medication records. So when we give a medication, we would time, date, and initial on a
Hmm.
medication record where what medication we gave, and then at midnight, and during the day, if you got new orders, you had to hand write it in to the medication record, and then at midnight it would print a new one, and you had to go line by line for every medication that the patient had ordered. And in the ICU, sometimes they have 30 medications. You had to go line by
Wow.
line through each one and make sure that it was correct during, and you're doing this at like 1:30, 2 a.m. And then all of a sudden
Oof.
they're like, guess what? We have electronic medication records now. And now you don't have to do that anymore. And I was like, what? I
Wow.
have 2 hours. What am I going to do with all this time? And my
Yeah.
tired eyes don't have to make sure I don't miss this mistake. And I don't have to, for orders, you don't have to decipher a physician's handwriting anymore and make sure you correctly transcribed the order or understood what they were asking, and all of a sudden it's typed into the computer. And like that seems so basic now, but even like that change, I think, was great for patient safety. It was great for efficiency. And
Mhm.
Yeah.
so,
That's
and
great.
like I said, that's just one like small thing, but it was, it's huge. And
Yeah.
technology, I think, does make patient care safer.
That's good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're doing things that can
That's
can
helping.
yes.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely.
I know you didn't. It's funny that you did well in school and it was kind of easy for you, maybe compared to the average person, but you didn't want to continue going to college. And maybe you were just ready to move on because that was just such a big part of your life for so long. But
Hmm.
what kind of advice would you give to someone who's going into college and wants to do the best they can and have the best experience that they can? Do you have any advice for someone in that position?
I think, and this is one thing that I didn't do. I always was very independent. Like I could do everything on my own. But one advice: join a community, have a support group, either or a network. It comes in handy in any stage of your career. Knowing the right people, having somebody to talk to, somebody to guide you, a mentor, you could say, or just someone you can confide into is a big help. As women, I think we are very selfless, and we put other people before ourselves. But sometimes you kind of need that help yourself. If you are kind of in that bubble that you have to do everything on your own, it can burn you out. Having a community, having people who are kind of reaching for the same goal, that gives you strength, that gives you motivation. And that's what happened to me too when I was in computer science, because engineering didn't come naturally to me. But I had a great group of friends who were, I mean, that's horrible to say, we were equally struggling together. So we kind of we crossed the finish line. But we helped each other out. There were concepts that I didn't understand, someone else did, and they would explain to me, and then vice versa.
When you started your career and you kind of got that first job out of college, how stressful was that for you? Did you feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing? The expectations are really high, or did you have a more positive experience?
I moved out of my parents' house when I graduated because I got a job in Minnesota. So that was it was a huge move. It wasn't really close to home. It was completely at the other end of the country. And it was my first time living on my own. So when I was in college, I was commuting back and forth. So that was like 25 miles one way and then driving back home. And I did that 5 days a week. So it saved a lot on housing and accommodation, but it was a lot of driving. And then when I got my job, I moved out of the house. It was figured things out on my own, finally living that adult life, paying your own bills and all that. So it was exciting. I wasn't too stressed out because I kind of had a similar experience growing up. But it was definitely very independent. It was a little scary and moving out and not having kind of that safety net, your parents that I grew up with all my life was the not terrifying, but it was
Yeah.
the new part.
Like a female, I think it's a great feeling when you can like grow up, reach your goals, and then like kind of reach that point of independence. Be like, hey, I can do what I want to do. I can pay for the things I want to pay for, within reason. And
Yeah.
I can live an independent life and not be reliant on somebody else. And I think there's a great freedom and satisfaction that comes from that.
Yeah, it definitely was. I'm like, I finally reached a goal where I'm able to take care of myself and I have my own home. I can do whatever I want with it. It was a lot of freedom all at once. But it was very satisfying to know that I finally reached a goal that I thought I would growing up.
Were there women that you worked with when you started your career?
That I worked with, there were a handful. There really weren't a lot. Particularly in computer science or in the technology, you really don't see a lot of women C-level, CEO
Yeah.
level, and all that. You don't see it. Even managerial level, you really don't see a lot. Um, I've worked in this field for about 8 years. I think I only had one female manager. The rest of them were
Mhm.
guys. And it was tough. It's really, well, maybe two, probably that's about it. That I really don't see a lot of women get into this field, and even if they're in this field, they're not able to kind of get promoted in that way.
Right.
I'm not sure exactly why. I mean, even they say that in our field that you could have the same kind of qualification, you could be the same age, you could be from the same background, but still a woman would be making 25 cents less than a male is.
Mhm.
Same qualification. It's a little unfair, but yeah, that's
We see that women are, and it's different per a field, but in general, in
hmm
corporate America, it's about at least promoted 2 years. It takes us 2 more years of experience to be equal to a man.
yeah,
And then still we have that glass ceiling of,
yeah,
well, you're not qualified to be a director or an executive.
yeah.
Did your employers make any effort to pair you with a woman mentor or kind of acknowledge that it may be beneficial for you to have a woman to talk to?
I don't think they purposely focus on the female part, but they
Right.
did when I first graduated from college and that was my first job out of college. They did give me a mentor. They paired me up with someone who's been with the company for 15 years and they had experience with just surviving in a corporate environment, how to ask the right questions, how to send out an email, but specifically a woman who understood the struggles or kind of understood where I was coming from. I think that didn't really happen. It didn't really occur to them either.
I think it would have been beneficial for you to, I mean, you kind of want both because sometimes you want a mentor that is your hero that you really look up to in the company, but it's
Hmm.
also nice to maybe have someone that you can relate to more.
I think it definitely would have been beneficial, and that is something that would have helped a lot because when you are just you fresh graduated from college, uh, it's a different world, especially in computer science. What we learn in college is not what we apply. It's a little different in the workforce. A lot of people move out for jobs or for colleges, so you have that change in lifestyle too. Even professionally, I think I think it would have helped a lot if you had someone who was in the similar situation as you and could guide you a little better.
Do you think about as you were younger and going through college, did you picture yourself down the road and what that would look like? And were you really focused on just having a great career, or was having a family always in the back of your mind on something that you would do or work on? Kind of how did you picture your life in the future?
Like I said, the unspoken pressure of being successful, that was there for sure. But also I think I had that desire of having my own home, having my own family. My husband and I, we dated throughout my college career, and then we knew we were going to get married after I graduated. So it was there. I mean, I did picture myself having a good career and still juggling the household responsibilities because I grew up watching my mom do it. And she would always say a quote that nothing reminds a man more of his home than freshly made bread or something like that. So like basically she was saying that it's your job to take care of the
Yeah.
kitchen and
Yep.
then um it's a selfless act of love to take care of the kitchen. Even if you're coming home at 5 o'clock and your husband's coming home at 5 o'clock, it's still your job to make the bread in
Yeah.
your home. So I still think I know for sure in my culture and back home people still follow that rule.
Mhm.
But I think now living in America for over 30 years, um, roles are a little more blended and a little more fluid.
Do you hope in the future that that continues to happen and that there is more neutral, when you think about the kids in the home and cooking, it's more up in the air of who has time tonight, who's getting home from work first. It's not any one person's responsibility. There's not set roles. Do you hope for that in the future, or do you like the idea of a woman primarily taking care of the children in the home?
My mentality is a home is both responsibilities. I mean, it's male and female, or husband or wife, or however. Um, Not everything, for example, cooking is not just a woman's role, it's your survival role. I
Yep.
mean, if my brother had to get up and go away for college or had to move to a different city, how is he going to feed himself if he doesn't
Yeah.
know how to cook? Or how is he going to clean his home if he doesn't know how to use a vacuum or stuff like that? So I don't think it's not a gender specific role. I think it's more of a survival specific role, learning how to cook or cleaning your house and having a career. I feel they're not role specific, and I really do hope and I plan on raising my children in that way where just because you have a sister or if I have a daughter, it's not her responsibility to wash the dishes and cook. It's gonna be the guy's. And it's good because whenever my son gets married and his wife wants to have a career or if she wants to do something with herself, my son would be in a place where he would see that growing up in his household and it wouldn't come to him
Mhm.
as a shock and he would be more willing to help around the
Right.
house and give his wife a little more of a breathing room.
I've noticed too, like, I know from my personal experiences, it's sometimes the roles are kind of fluid, and I tend to be home during the week, and my husband watches our daughter when I'm working on the weekends when he's not
Yeah.
working. And so, but during the week, I do take on most of like the house cleaning and cooking and stuff, but then there's also times when there's been times in our marriage where I'm was in school and I was working more, and then the roles kind of just naturally flipped. And I think it's valuable when it can be more fluid like that.
Gives each other more room, and I think it's foundation for a healthier relationship. I remember one day I was coming home from I think the gym, and then I yelled out my husband's name, like, "Where are you?" And he's in the kitchen in shorts with music blasting in the background, and he's chopping up vegetables for me, and I'm like, that is probably the most sweetest thing you've ever done.
Nothing
But
like coming home to dinner.
right, it was so adorable. I mean, he doesn't know how to cook. I mean, the man can hardly boil an egg, but like it was adorable seeing him in his little shorts and chopping away and has his favorite songs in the background. So I think it definitely gives you a healthier relationship, and it gives women more time to think for themselves. Um, and they can think about themselves and do things that they actually like. But yeah, I definitely think roles should be a little more fluid or a little more blended.
What would you say to a woman who wants to get into computer science and is really torn about having a career that she's really passionate about and maybe moving up to a C-suite job, but she also wants to have 3 kids and be very family oriented? What would you say to her, or any, piece of information or something to think about for her as she's making those decisions?
And I've been told this a million times, and being a woman, I think I still don't fully accept this, but sometimes you just really have to think about yourself. Sometimes it's really important to put yourself up first, because don't they say like if your cup is empty, you really can't pour into someone else's. Um, a lot of people, a lot of women particularly would just sacrifice themselves for their family. And if anybody comes up to me and say they want to have a thriving career in any field, I think they should just go ahead and do it. You will never be ready. I read a quote somewhere like you'll never be able to plan everything. You won't
Mhm.
always be ready. You won't be 100% sure about something, but just go ahead and do it. If you have a fair idea of what you want to do and how to do it, jump right in. Go ahead and do it. And then things will adjust. Things will adjust to the new. In my parents' case, in my case, everything just kind of falls into place after a certain time. You come to a dead end, you readjust yourself, you find a different direction, and then just kind of continue going forward.
I think that's great advice.
Second that.
Is your job flexible now? Did you end up getting that flexibility that you were looking for?
I did. When COVID hit, I think offices were just completely shut down. And a lot of companies, they closed down a couple of locations permanently, and they moved into a more hybrid work model or remote. I was working remote for 4 years. So that was great. And it did have its challenges, being struggling between housework and office and meetings and stuff. But I did eventually get that I was looking for in my career and in my own business as well.
You did well in school. You went to college. You studied 2 very difficult, demanding areas, academically. And then you jumped into your career. You moved out by yourself. You started a job right away. How do you deal with stress, and what advice would you give someone? I know we're always growing and learning, but through your life, what advice would you give to a younger person in terms of dealing with stress?
I think the way I managed stress myself was having someone to talk to, having somebody to vent out to, either if it was my sister, if it was my husband, or just a friend. I also changed a little bit of my lifestyle. I started being more active. I noticed there was a significant change when I would work out in the mornings and just kind of go on my day. My mood was better. I had a lot more energy. I wasn't tired, or drained by the end of the day as much. Um, your diet, your lifestyle definitely affects your mental health. And I think a lot of people are more aware of mental health, the importance of mental health now than they were back then. There are a lot of studies, there are a lot of help out there, there's a lot of resources out there. And I think that definitely helped me manage my stress. Meditation is also one, doing yoga is one. And these are, and meditation has different forms. I mean, either it's through prayer, either it's through just quietly being in a room, or just relaxing, doing stretching, any way that helps you kind of calm down. Technology definitely helped. You wear your Apple Watches, you have your Fitbits, and that like, if one time I was stressed about something. I don't remember what about it was, but my heart rate was really elevated, and my Apple Watch started beeping like, "Well, you're at rest, you're not moving, but your heart rate is higher than it's supposed to be." And then they have these mindful apps where you kind of do deep breathing exercises, and that can help me calm down. And I'm like, that was probably the first time I really appreciated my Apple Watch. But yeah, I think managing stress, and there are a lot of ways now, and I think people are more educated about that now than they were before.
What do you think is a downside to being in computer science and being a software engineer that someone might not think about going into that field?
It's forever changing, so there's always going to be that learning curve every couple of years. For example, when I graduated 2016, automation was the biggest thing, the biggest trend out there. Everybody wanted to learn automation and wanted to save time, cut down costs. Now it's everything data, everything AI. So the field, if you're not relevant, or if you're not staying on top of the new skills, I feel that could be a disadvantage to you and to your career. That's one. And I think being, and particularly for being a woman, I think it's just a little harder to get promoted, to get to a certain level. And I think that's just overall any women in any field.
What do you think about AI and the impact that it's going to have on society? Just kind of what's something that comes to mind, that how is it going to change our lives over the next 20 years?
AI definitely is useful. I mean, if you like ChatGPT, I mean, but I feel there is a disadvantage to it, is people aren't using their potential to their fullest. I mean, like, someone who's naturally a really good writer would probably depend too much on technology and not use their own potential to the fullest, and just depend on technology too much. But on versus someone who's not so great at writing, if they use ChatGPT or use any kind of AI source tool and help improve their writing and be able to leverage that in their business or however,
Ah,
that could be a pro for them. So
right.
it's really a double-edged sword. And I think in today's time, we're just so bombarded with so much information, and sometimes they're very contradicting information of the same thing. So it's there. It is the future. It's there for a while, but I think it really depends on how you use it, and you try to make the most of it without honestly handicapping yourself.
I think that's a good point. I know my husband is in a position where he hires people on a somewhat regular basis, and he said that they've started running into the issue of people using like Chat GPT to like even take like if they do like online assessments or even like Zoom interviews, they'll have like a separate window open, and they'll have like Chat GPT listen to the
Mhm.
question, and then it'll like pop up with an answer um, during a remote interview. And I thought that was an interesting take, because it's like, okay, so you maybe do this interview kind of, you seem like you ace it, but then you get into this role that maybe you're not suited for.
And it's crazy because now there are softwares, like if I'm looking directly at the camera, um you can see me like looking right at you, versus if there are apps where if you're looking off to the side and you're kind of reading off notes or your cheat sheet or whatever, the AI would detect your eyes and shift them so where it looks like we're
Yeah.
looking right at the camera, but honestly we're just reading off notes on the side. So it's great, it's a great tool, but it's also very dangerous.
What are you working on now?
So right now I'm in the process of developing my own company, and hopefully in a couple of months from now I'll be ready to launch. My company name is allies.ai. Well, I started about in June, so it's been about 6 months from now. And I think it really came to me when I felt like I've been in the industry for so long, and I'm able to maneuver around blocks like I used to. May not be a great coder, but at least I know how to get around in this industry and thought I could probably leverage off of that knowledge. Basically, what my company does is we help startups or we help businesses establish their digital footprint, your website, your apps, your social media. We help promote their businesses and then we leverage their data and kind of help them see where their business is headed and how much it'll grow, kind of forecast their growth for them based off their data and how they're doing. Uh, that's what I do. I still continue to work remote as a software engineer. I'm also juggling household. I'm still juggling opening up a new company. Just doing all of that all at the same time.
Was that scary for you when you first kind of made that decision to put some effort into starting a new company?
It was scary because I had no idea like what direction to take because saw a lot of tasks. My backlog was filled up. I have to get my company registered. I have to come up with a name. I have to hire somebody for branding. A lot of stuff all at the same time, and I think I had a hard time prioritizing what was important and what wasn't. Um, but I think the way I handled that was just write everything down. I did a brain dump. I do journaling a lot. I'll just dump everything, Word document or in a notebook, and then just start prioritizing and seeing what I want to work on first. Other thing, another advice or another tool that I learned in my project management class and in my master's, take sticky notes, write one task per sticky note and just stick them on a wall and then just kind of like move them around. I think that's just easier for people who are a little more
Ah,
hands-on versus typing. I'm more of a typer, and I'll just like copy paste and move them around. But like if somebody doesn't like that and doesn't like that method, they can write their tasks down on sticky notes and then put them on a big wall and then just start kind of like categorizing, color coding, and moving them around in the order that they feel they should be worked on.
I like that because it's kind of fun. Like that sounds fun to
Yeah.
me, getting to move things around like that and all the different
Yeah.
ways you could organize it.
Yep.
I might try that. I'm gonna need a whole wall though.
I know what to get you for Christmas.
Yeah, I might have to hire someone to manage my sticky
As a
notes.
sticky note
Ugh,
manager. That sounds like a full-time job.
What is something that you would like to improve on, either personally or professionally? Something that I'd like to be better at this, or I wish I could do this better. It can be a skill, it can be something more in your personal life.
I think personally, I would like to learn to put myself first. And just I guess coming from my background, coming from the culture that I'm from, it's a little hard to do that, especially with all that history. And then I guess I grew out of that culture, but even there's still some of that remnants in me, and I feel this is something as women we should learn to do of any age of any culture. Uh, think about yourself from time to time and put yourself first. Learn to say no. Learn to have boundaries. Have your priorities set and straight. Professionally, I should have worked a little more on my personal development in certifications or additional course. Thought once I have my master's degree, I'm done. I don't need to open books anymore, and I kind of worked to my technologies. I probably would have been in a little better space.
Like you said, technology is always evolving. So you're in this constant cycle
Oh
of
yeah,
having to learn more, and the employers are going to look for a different certification, and something else is going to be trending. And it's just that constant
right.
evolution.
I learned that the hard way. I'm
What do your parents think about your life now and kind of everything that you have going on? Um, what is their opinion of where you're at in life?
I think when my parents look at their children, I think they're very happy to see them successful. They've made something of themselves. Both of their eldest children graduated with engineering degrees. They have jobs, they have careers and businesses. They definitely feel like they've done their part as parents. Uh, their sacrifices that they made were a good choice. they were successful in that, and their hard work paid off. So they definitely feel very proud of their kids. You definitely see them more relaxed now, at this age where they're like, okay, we can finally do things our own way. We can go on vacation by ourselves. Our kids are old enough to handle themselves now, and they can make their own decisions.
Is there any part of Pakistan that you wish we had in the US?
I think it's very different to put into words. Culture there is very family oriented. It's very selfless. Um, versus the culture, if you look at it from their perspective, the individualism here, somebody can wake up one day and say, well, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do something completely different. And you have that support, you have that system set in place that can help you do that. Versus in Pakistan, it's a little more difficult, it's a little more challenging, not just financially, not just academically, but also that society pressure that we have back at home, where, well, how are you going to start your life again at 40 or 50 or how whatever age you want to change things around. I think the culture, there's good and bad to it. You definitely see families are more closer together. There's still families that still have a joint family system, and they still live together under the same roof. And it's a good thing. You have family close by, you have that extra help, and sometimes it's not. You don't lack that privacy, or you you still have that influence of your parents at a certain age where you wish you were a little more independent.
Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you think is really important or that you have on your mind?
How times changes and how women progress in careers, there is always going to be that small hook or that small guilt, or just a little small part of every woman that feels a little guilty that the household responsibility is her own and she's not open to accepting that help. Or even today, women just don't accept a man taking care of a household. I don't think we're there yet. No matter how much we say that we would love to have our spouses help us in the household or cook dinner for us once in a while, I still think that we're just programmed in that way where even if the husband does cook dinner, well, it's not the way that I would have done it, or we would still go back and say, well, you could have done this differently. I think letting go from time to time is important. Um, your house will be a mess. Dinner might not be ready at 7 o'clock sharp, or the kids may not be raised in a certain way where you thought is what I wanted to do. Everybody has different experiences, and your experiences shape your character. It shapes your personality, and being open to that and not having something set in stone is gonna relieve the burden off of you, which I feel women desperately need, is to take some load off their.
I always feel really guilty. I don't like being in the house a lot at all. I feel like I'm allergic to the
Oh,
house. But if I go like a whole week and I only cook twice, I start to feel guilty, like I'm not doing a good job, or gosh, what's wrong with me? Like I
right.
can't make a meal, and there's these other girls that do it all, and I can't, like I just, but it's me personally. I like to be outdoors and my job is very indoors. And so as soon as I'm
Mm-hmm.
done, I'm like, let's go outside. Like, let's grab a pizza or an apple and cheese and go outside. It's just me
Right.
personally, what I like, but carry
Mm-hmm.
that guilt, and it causes me to kind of not be myself and pull myself back
Yeah.
into the norms of society.
I think you just should be fluid and just kind of go with what your personality is like, and in any aspect, in your career, in how you manage your home, how you raise your children. I have friends back at home and they raise their children in a completely different way that maybe I would have never raised my children. And they're okay with it. It works for them, it works for their household. I think we're fortunate to live in a society where we really don't judge people. We just judge ourselves. I'm like, if somebody comes up to me and say, "Hey, well, I'm not cooking at home at all. My husband does all that cooking." I wouldn't judge somebody like that. If that works for your household, that works for you. It's just what your natural abilities are, what naturally you feel comfortable in doing is probably where you should follow.
And I think like especially with like the prevalence of like social media and just being able to see snippets of
Yeah.
people's lives on like a daily basis and maybe it's not like a totally real representation. I think it's interesting to,
Yeah.
it's important to not always compare yourself to other people because first of all, you're probably not seeing the entire story. And second of all, your
Right.
life is different and and I think what you said is what works for you might not work for somebody else and what works for somebody else might not work for the person down the street and it's okay. You just have to find what works for you. I know for me that relieves a lot of guilt just to be like I don't have to do what, especially with Christmas coming and stuff, I know with little kids there's so much pressure to like make it super magical and to do all the things
Hmm.
and it's like you don't have to do all the things.
Right.
You can do some of the things and you can do the things that are enjoyable and fun for you, but you don't have to try to always measure up to what you have in your head as what needs to happen or needs to be done to be okay and to be a success. And you're right, it is a lot of pressure and it's good to relieve
Yeah.
yourself of that.
And I don't think society puts that much pressure
Mhm.
versus the pressure that we put on ourselves.
Absolutely.
Um, we set up our own expectations, and they're very high expectations. Whether someone says it or not, it's just something that we have in our own head. And everything on social media, it's not fake. I wouldn't say it's fake, but it's edited. It's
Yeah.
not raw. It's not raw emotions. It's not. It's all edited. It's rehearsed. Even if someone's gonna film a get ready with me or my day in life, and then you see somebody come out of the bed, that person's been up maybe at 5 a.m. and has everything set up, and then you see them waking out of bed. That's not them getting out of bed at that time. So, yeah, I think letting go once in a while is good for you, and just not expecting so much. A lot of people, you see a trend of technology detox. People will just shut down their phone with I think smartphones now are capable of doing that where you can just kind of mute your notifications and just I know Instagram has a time limit. If you spend an hour on Instagram, um it'll just kind of send you an alert that okay, you spend an hour today, do you want to stop? And you can ignore that if you like, but I think kind of detaching yourself from technology in today's day is kind of important for your own mental health. Another thing I wanted to mention is I'm also a tech mentor. I do have one or two mentees that I'm helping out in their technology career. So that's another service that I offer. And this is something I do as a way to giving back to the community. Given my history, given my past, it's nice to have somebody who has years of experience or has years of knowledge in this certain field and it can help guide you. I have a mentee who has an undergrad in architecture and she spent 3 years working as an architect, but now she wants to break away from that and get into technology. So it's something I do for free. There's limited spaces, there's limited slots per day. And this is just kind of my way of giving back to the community and helping other women or anybody in particular who wants to get into this industry, helping them out with that.